The Lindbergh kidnapping stunned the world in 1932, and the ransom notes were central to evidence in a case that appeared closed forever. But now, nearly a full century later, the FBI reanalyzed the same notes with contemporary forensic technology. What they found wasn't just surprising, it was something that never should have existed in the first place. A hidden component, secretly masked from sight, has been revealed. And its existence is compelling a re-evaluation of a crime that everybody believed was comprehensively understood. For generations, the Lindbergh ransom notes rested in quiet obscurity within the FBI's archives, boxed, labeled, and preserved as historical artifacts. These fragile documents had already played their part in convicting Bruno Richard Hauptmann, the man held responsible for kidnapping and murdering Charles Lindbergh Jr. in 1932. The general consensus was that their secrets had been exhausted decades ago. But in 2025, that assumption was quietly dismantled. Using the advantage of the latest forensic equipment, the FBI launched a program to re-examine prominent cold case evidence. Lindbergh ransom notes were among the first set chosen for examination. Anticipation was low, most hoped the scans would only confirm already reached conclusions. The handwriting looked like Hauptmann's, the ink was of the time period, and the case was settled history. But the scans had a very different message to convey. These methods were not something out of science fiction, but science at long last doing what it can do today. Multispectral and hyperspectral imaging, and chemical ink analysis, enabled researchers to penetrate deeper into the physical structure of paper than was ever before possible. These techniques can reveal deleted text, concealed impressions, and even foreign substances embedded in the fibers themselves. When the notes moved through these scanners, one of the technicians noticed something strange. It wasn't ink on the surface of the page, it was ink trapped in the paper. At first, it looked like just a random smudge. But using enhanced imaging, they could see that it was deliberate, a series of very small, almost invisible characters. Some looked like symbols, others were small numbers or shorthand letters. None were visible to the naked eye, and none had previously been observed in previous testing. The anomaly was too strong to be overlooked. The scan was rescanned, then examined by two other groups independently. In each test, the same marks were present, in the same spots, on many of the ransom notes. It was no byproduct of the process, it had existed from the beginning, hidden for close to a century. The FBI has not yet revealed the complete interpretation of the concealed characters, but sources say that they don't belong to any alphabet or code that was recorded in the course of the initial investigation. Some analysts believe they could be part of a cipher or a concealed communication method called steganography, messages embedded within other materials. More fascinatingly, the ink mixture of these hidden inscriptions does not replicate the ransom note message. Early analysis indicates that the concealed substance may have originated from an earlier period, potentially decades following 1932. That discovery upgraded the case from interesting to disturbing. If the kidnapper did not insert these markings, then who and for what reason? Upon verification, the FBI quietly compiled a specialized task force to assess if the markings could have been inserted by mistake, possibly through subsequent handling or exposure to the environment. To date, all evidence points to intentional insertion. In addition, there is no evidence they were inserted by any party involved in the investigation, either in the 1930s or thereafter. Formally, the Lindbergh case has not been reopened by the Bureau. Informally, sources have confirmed that the symbols are being cross-checked against the unsolved crimes of the same period. Forensic linguists, cryptographers, and historians have been recruited to interpret the symbol's potential meaning. When the news broke at last, aired cautiously, with no fanfare, it shocked the public. The Lindbergh kidnapping is not just an open-and-shut case, it's American folklore. Everyone thought the verdict was in. But now a new and mysterious factor had entered the picture. Media sources speculated freely. Social media burst with speculation. Was the case solved in error? Might another person have been responsible? Was this the start of a more profound, more complex mystery? The FBI, as yet, has kept their tongues tightly locked. But their behavior suggests they are taking the discovery seriously. The media are demanding information, and members of the Lindbergh family are demanding explanations. To fully understand the magnitude of this news, though, we have to go back to the start, back to what happened in 1932, and why this tragedy had the world in its grasp. America was obsessed with a crime in the spring of 1932 that would go down as one of the most notorious in the country. Charles Lindbergh, the hero of his solo flight across the Atlantic, and his wife, and Morrow Lindbergh, were pulled, suddenly, into a living nightmare. In the early morning hours of March 1, their 20-month-old son, Charles Jr., was kidnapped from his nursery in their New Jersey residence. It was soon discovered, the window to the nursery was open, a crude homemade ladder was on the ground below, and a note resting on the radiator specified $50,000 for the return of the child, spoken of in stilted English and signed with a peculiar circular symbol. This was the first of numerous to follow. There followed a desperate nationwide hunt. During the subsequent weeks, 13 ransom letters arrived, each ratcheting up the tension. The messages included threats, changing demands, and the same cryptic symbol. Their horrible spelling and strange grammar added to the intrigue about the identity of the writer. Dr. John F. Condon, a retired schoolteacher, acted voluntarily as a go-between. He took out ads in the papers, got responses, and professed to having encountered the abductor, John, a man who had a distinct German accent, inside a Bronx cemetery. Condon's involvement, unorthodox and incompletely comprehended, was at the forefront of the negotiations. Eventually, the ransom was paid, $50,000, most of it in shortly to be recalled gold certificates. The drop was made in the Bronx, and the kidnapper said the boy was on a boat off Massachusetts. The lead was false. On May 12, the search ended in tragedy. The corpse of a toddler who had been dead for weeks was found in woods not more than 5 miles away from the Lindbergh residence. He had died as the result of a head blow. The case lingered more than 2 years with thousands of leads. Then, in 1934, a gas station attendant in the Bronx took one of the gold certificates and wrote down the driver's license plate of the spender. It led to Bruno Richard Hauptmann, a German immigrant carpenter. Officials discovered $14,000 of ransom money stored in his garage. Hauptmann maintained his innocence, stating that the money was that of a deceased partner. Authorities were skeptical. Handwriting experts indicated he wrote the ransom demands, and wood from the latter contained similar floorboards in his attic. His 1935 trial was a media sensation. The prosecution relied heavily on the phrasing, handwriting, and crest of the ransom notes. Lindbergh himself testified. The jury found Hauptmann guilty, and he was electrocuted in 1936. Most accepted the verdict as final, but not everyone. Right from the start, there were questions raised about the fairness of the investigation, the validity of the evidence, and the likelihood of others involved. Through it all, however, the ransom notes continued to be one of the prosecution's most incriminating pieces of evidence. The initial ransom notes were more than mere demands, they were written with a thoughtful, unnerving flair. 13 in total, each brief, each threatening boldly, and all with typical spelling errors. The first was abandoned in the nursery, raw and intentional, establishing the tone for everything thereafter. Composed in fractured English with sentences such as, "We warn you for making anything public or for notify the police," the tone was broken but certain. The kidnapper's tone in these messages was not pleading or emotional, it was forceful and chilling. Price increases, threats, and ultimatums were substituted for any promise that the child was well. The repeated symbol, 2 overlapping circles, 3 punched-out holes, and a red and blue crosshatch, was as mysterious as it was unique. Its significance is still a mystery. Handwriting comparisons took center stage. They were matched to Hauptmann by experts, but forensic examination then was based on how it looked and not the precision that is available today. Even then, opposing experts challenged whether the match was real. The language of the notes also came into suspicion. A lot of people suspected that the writer was a native German speaker. Some thought the language mistakes might be deliberate misdirection. The unflinching tone and the fabricated statements, such as being on the non-existent boat Nellie, implied forethought and deception. For years, scholars pored over the text in hopes of finding secret codes, patterns, or references to recognized groups. No conclusive connection was made. Which is why the new discovery, that the paper itself held a secret, renders the whole picture of the case different. For almost a century, the ransom notes were dormant, stored under strict archival conditions. Following Hauptmann's execution, they were relics, dug out every so often for exhibition or study but never investigated more deeply than the surface. During the 1930s, preservation merely involved keeping paper from physical deterioration. The notes were copied into acid-free folders and stored. Chain of custody documentation was sparse compared with today. Fragments of the latter and other materials were known to have vanished over the years. With modern technology, however, document forensics can detect the undetectable, hidden writing, layered inks, or microscopic foreign matter. The FBI's 2025 scanning project wasn't launched to reopen the case but to digitally preserve fragile artifacts. The embedded markings surfaced purely because the tools finally existed to find them. With the note's sealed storage history, the possibility of contemporary tampering is negligible. It leads to a chilling question: if those markings have existed all these years, then why were they put there, and who did it? The Lindbergh find serves as a reminder of a greater reality: history's artifacts can hold secrets, biding their time until the appropriate technology to be discovered.